In this video, we'll talk about what variables are in Figma, how they're different than styles, are they even useful, and then we'll go through practically how to set them up for the first time. At Config 2023, Figma announced a new feature called variables. So you're probably thinking, what even are variables? With variables, they allow you to save values in Figma. So similar to styles, but they're a little bit different. So styles, you can save things like text or color, but variables, you can save a value. So you can take it a step further. It's sort of like styles, but a bit more supercharged. So for an example, as a value you could set up, you could start setting up number values, which could be used as your spacing in your design system. So all your padding or your corner radiuses could all be set up to match a variable. And this means that it can be all reusable as well. You can also take it further by connecting different lists of variables together and just take it that step further that styles you could never achieve with. So why are variables even useful? Imagine you have a design system and you build all these different pages for this big web property you're working on, and you've realized that you've actually set up the wrong corner radius for the buttons and the input fields and the text area fields, and all these things have the wrong corner radius. Say for this example, you set it to 2, but it actually needs to be set to 4 for all this. So if you had set up all the corner radiuses and they're all linked to a variable. Previously, if you had to go and update all these, if you had set it up well, you could update the components, but you'd have to update all the individual components. If this was all set to a variable, you could just go to the variables and update that variable from 2 pixels to 4 pixels. And the knock-on effect of that is that that would go to the buttons and the input field, and it would be consistent across everything, and all those things would be updated globally. It also means that your file is going to be a lot more consistent and streamlined for when you're doing handover. If everything is connected to a set of variables, say you're using based off a 16 pixel one, so based off RAM, and everything's connected to a variable. When you're doing handover, you can walk the development team through and saying, here's all the spacing, all the padding and everything is based off this set of spacing variables here. So they know when they're building things that it should be connecting to this. This can ensure a lot more consistency when you're getting large design jobs and handing them over to development. They're actually getting built. You can know that it's actually going to match what you did in the design because it will be consistent. Another powerful thing you can do with variables is you can set up theming with them. So by adding different variable modes, you can have different things, like you can have a light and a dark theme of colors with different variable modes that are connected together. So if you set all your light colors, and then you added another variable mode, and you could set the counterparts all in the dark colors. When you're moving your components or your designs from light to dark, they'll instantly shift instead of before you'd have to do a lot of manual work. This can all be set up and achieved with variables now. There's a lot of different things you could do with this. You could also set up spacing with different variable modes. So you could set up all your desktop spacing. If you knew, for example, that your buttons were going to have 16 pixel padding all in them on desktop, but you knew that was going to change to 12 pixels on mobile, you could set up 2 variable modes where it would be all 16 on desktop and then 12 on mobile. So then as you changed it from desktop to mobile, you could shift the variable mode, and that would change everything automatically. Instead of having 2 different things before, you could have it all as one component. Another thing you could do is you could set up compact and spacious. So you could have different versions of your component, but you can take it to the next level now. So before it would be a lot more manual work, changing all the spacing and the padding in the auto layout. But now if you have it set up as variables, it actually will save you a lot of time as it'll be automatically linked. And if you put the work in at the variable level, that will have an effect that will trickle on through your design and give you a lot more flexibility, but also keep consistency as you're working through things. So in Figma now, to set up variables, it's a little confusing at the start of how to even get into variables. So if you have a frame or anything selected, your right side panel will look like this. So you need to actually unselect everything. So click the background area so there's nothing selected. So your side panel changes to this. Once it changes to this, you have a few options here of local styles, export, page, background color, and also most importantly, the local variables option. So once you select that, you can bring up the variables panel, which is where we'll be setting up all the variables today. So this is a fresh file. So it's just named collection 1. You can create a new collection and name that. Or just within collection 1, there's some options in here. So you could just rename this one your collection if you wanted to. Also the other options in here fairly standard of just rename, or you can delete collections as well. So to create a variable, it's fairly simple. It's right here of the create variable button. So when you click create variable, there's a few options in here. So you can set up color variables, number variables, string variables, or Boolean variables. The two we'll be focusing on today is the color and the number variables. The string and the Boolean variables, from my understanding, are more to do with prototyping, which this video isn't about. This video is more about setting it up if you're using websites or design systems, which is why you'd be using color and numbers. So let's just set up a first one just as a test. So your options in here is you can name the variable or what it's going to be, and then set its value as well. So this one's just going to be a white variable, so we'll set it as this. Now if we wanted to apply that variable to our desktop here, we can close this, and now when we come in here, very similar to styles, where styles were in circles, these are in squares. You can apply the variable here, and now it's applied as a background. So if you went back into variables now, and say this was your background that's been applied and you wanted to change it across everything, you would just come in here and you could change it, and that would automatically be applied to everything that you've applied that white variable to. So that's the basis of setting up color variables. If you wanted to set up spacing variables, we'll go through that process now. Similar as before, of this time we're going to select number, and select this as space 1. And the number that you put in here compared to when you have the color value, the number is how many pixels you're setting this variable to be. So I'll set a few up and then I'll show you how it would work in action. Now that I've set up a few space variables, I'll show you how practically why this is helpful and how you can apply it. Say this is a button here, and we're going to apply auto layout, so Shift A. Now when we're setting the auto layout spacing and the padding in the side here, when you hover over it, there's a new button here, which is the variables icon. If you click the variables icon, it will give you this drop down that shows you all the different variables that I just set up there. So if we wanted to keep everything consistent, if we know all buttons are going to have 24 pixels on the side, and they're going to have 16 pixels top and bottom. This is all linked to a variable now, so if we wanted to change this, we could change it on the variable level, which would apply to all the buttons. It's also consistent as well, as if we apply this to multiple different things now, we know that all spacing will be consistent. It's all based on the foundation of the spacing variables that we set up. So now that we've applied our basic padding to this button, we can go a step further of using the colors that we set up before as well. I just set up this blue, the text of the button to be white as well, which we can use as our white variable. Another area you could use spacing in is in your corner radius. So same as before, if you hover, you get this button here. And as you look down, if we know that all buttons for our website or web property is going to be 8, we can make sure that we select 8 so that it's consistent as we go across. Now we know for sure that everything in this button is going to be consistent, as everything here is based off our variables we've set up. So it's really easy if we need to make any global updates, we can go to the variable level and update it there. But we also know that when we hand this over to the developers, that if we give them the spacing that we've set, the things aren't going to have 25 pixels and they're not going to have 18 pixels, but it'll be following the 24 and the 16, as they'll have the spacing variables that we set up. Another thing you can do with variables is you can set different modes, as I was explaining before. So if you look at this one, I can shift this whole thing from light to dark mode very easily as it auto shifts. So let's go a few steps backwards and break down how that actually works. So same as before, it all starts in the local variable window and it all starts with a collection. So let's rename our collection light and dark mode. And I'm just going to follow the process of, I'm going to turn everything here that's a color and I'm going to link it to a variable. So now I've set all the colors up, I just need to make sure that all these colors are linked. So come into here and make sure it's linked to the right color here. So now that all the colors here are matching the variables here, for example, if I change this, it's going to change button background. Click this button to make a new variable mode, and now we'll name it so it's more clear. So this one will be a dark mode and this will be light mode. So now what we want to do is we want to make a one-to-one counterpart of all the light modes into the dark mode. So how we want this card to look when it moves into the dark mode. And now that we've set up all the values, the next thing we need to make sure is that Figma knows which should be light and which should be dark. So you can do this on a frame level, on a page level, and automatically it will be set to your first mode that you set up. So our first one was light. So we set this one to light, and then we'll set this second frame to be dark mode. And now because we've already set it up in the variable, if we just drag it from the area where it's in light mode to dark mode, it will instantly shift straight away. So all the colors have changed to what we had set it as the second mode, which is the dark mode. And if we shift it back, it shifts back to the light mode. This is going to save so much time building out a light and a dark mode. If you can think about it and set that foundation correctly, and you know that the colors will have a one-to-one match and you can work on that, you're going to be able to give people double the amount of work in a much shorter amount of time. Another helpful tip I found in variables is how to group things together. So the same as styles, but all my spacing variables to be together. So if I have this as space and then I put a /, that's going to actually make a group called space. So now I'll group all these together. And I'll do the same thing for the color. So now visually it's much easier to see these are the color variables and these are the space variables. Also, as these lists gets bigger, it's helpful to have this side panel and you can filter it out to just show what you want to look for. Here's the design system that I'm building out at the moment, and I've been working and playing around with variables in it. Another thing you can do with variables is you can set up them so that they link to each other. So for example, I've set primitive colors, which is the bottom layer that I want the colors to be in, and they're named 100 to 900 as the tint and shade of it changes. And then the next layer above primitive colors, I have colored tokens, which is a bit more actionable. I have my default, my hover, and my press. So I have some states here, and I also I've set up the text as well. And these variables are actually not just selected, but if you change it from custom to library, you can actually see your other variables you have. And I'm linking to variable blue 500 that I set up before. So now I have a lot of control of if I want to change something on the primitive level, that they'll actually update as I have different strands that have branched off onto this color token level. As this video is more just for beginners and setting up variables for the first time, I'm not going to dive super far into this, but if you want to make a video more about advanced ways of setting up variables and how to link lists together and the methodology behind that, put a comment below and I'll make a video on that in the future. If you have any questions about variables, put them below, or if you want to watch another video and learn about interactive component, watch this one.